At my sister's graduation ceremony, my parents told everyone they were cutting me out of the family will. They didn't know I'd already found the documents proving they'd stolen my inheritance, and I was about to expose everything. My name is Emma Reynolds. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Last spring, at my sister's Northeastern University graduation, my parents stood in front of extended family and friends and announced they were removing me from our family trust. No warning, no private conversation first, just a public declaration that Olivia would be the sole beneficiary of the Reynolds legacy. They even had the audacity to smile while doing it. What they didn't realize was that I'd already discovered the paper trail, forged signatures, manipulated trust documents, and the quiet transfer of my grandmother Eleanor's lake house that should have been mine. In the end, they weren't the ones who exposed me. I exposed them. The morning of Olivia's graduation dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that makes Boston feel magical. Cherry blossoms dotted the sidewalks outside my Cambridge apartment, while I stood in front of my mirror, smoothing down the navy dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I wanted to look put together, professional, the kind of daughter who belonged in family photos, even though deep down I suspected I wouldn't be in many. I arrived at Northeastern's campus early, not from excitement, but from anxiety. The sprawling, green lawn was already filling with proud families clutching bouquets and balloon arrangements. Students in black gowns wandered between buildings, gold tassels swinging with each step. I stood at the edge, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, feeling like an intruder at someone else's celebration. When I spotted my parents near the reserved seating section, my steps slowed involuntarily. Diane Reynolds stood straight-backed in her cream pantsuit, hair perfectly coiffed, already chatting with another set of parents. My father Robert checked his watch repeatedly, his stance projecting impatience. Between them stood Olivia, radiant in her graduation gown, multiple honor cords draped around her neck. The perfect Reynolds success story. They didn't notice me, approaching until I was nearly beside them. When my mother's eyes finally landed on me, her smile tightened at the corners. "Emma," she said, her tone flat, "you made it." "I got the email," I replied, ignoring the coolness in her voice. "Wouldn't miss Leave's big day." My father glanced up from his phone. "We weren't sure you'd come. The RSVP deadline was last week." "I responded 3 weeks ago," I said, keeping my voice even. "To Mom's assistant." Diane waved her hand dismissively. "There must have been a miscommunication." Olivia broke the tension by stepping forward to hug me. "Em, I'm so glad you're here," she whispered, her embrace brief but genuine. I noticed her eyes darting toward our mother as she pulled away, gauging the appropriate amount of warmth to show. Near the registration table, I spotted the family seating chart. The Reynolds family was printed in elegant script at the top, followed by the names Robert, Diane, Olivia, plus 2 guests. I searched for my name, checking and rechecking the list. It wasn't there. A student volunteer handed me a visitor badge, plain white with guest printed across it in stark black letters. No family name, no relationship identifier. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering how I'd helped design the Reynolds family, crest for our foundation's letterhead when I was in high school. My father had praised my attention to detail then. Now, I was reduced to an anonymous visitor. I should have walked away. Anyone with a shred of dignity would have turned around and left. Instead, I clipped the badge to my dress and took a seat, in the general admission section, surrounded by strangers rather than family. The ceremony began promptly at 10. After the customary speeches from the university president and a local politician, the dean announced a special address from a distinguished parent and philanthropist. My stomach dropped as my father stood and approached the podium. Robert adjusted his tie, tapped the microphone twice, and beamed at the audience. "Today," he began, "we celebrate extraordinary achievement. My daughter Olivia has exemplified everything the Reynolds name stands for: excellence, dedication, and vision. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Olivia lowered her eyes modestly. This day also marks a significant transition for our family, he continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. As we focus on the future of the Reynolds legacy, we've made the difficult but necessary decision to consolidate our family resources. I felt myself go very still. Moving forward, the Reynolds Family Trust will recognize Olivia as its sole beneficiary, as she has demonstrated the commitment to our values and vision that will carry our family name forward. My face burned as heads turned subtly in my direction. From several rows ahead, my mother sat rigidly, eyes fixed forward, chin slightly raised as if daring anyone to question this announcement. Some paths diverge, my father continued, and today we celebrate not just Olivia's academic success, but her position as the future of the Reynolds name. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry out or storm off. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, focusing on a spot just above my father's head while he finished his speech. Only when the next speaker took the podium did I quietly stand and walk toward the exit, my movements mechanical, my breathing shallow. Outside the auditorium, I leaned against a brick wall, forcing air into my lungs. A text notification lit up my phone, a former classmate who was attending the ceremony. "Are you okay? That was brutal. Did you know that was coming?" I didn't respond. Instead, I wandered the campus perimeter, giving myself time before facing the reception. By the time I returned, the ceremony had ended and guests were filtering into the garden, area where white-clothed tables had been arranged beneath strung lights. I approached the table marked Reynolds and scanned the place cards. Diane, Robert, Olivia, Aunt Claudia, Uncle Thomas, two of my father's business partners. But again, no Emma. A woman I vaguely recognized from my parents' social circle paused as she passed. "Oh, Emma, are you helping with the event staff today? How thoughtful of you to support your sister." I looked down at my guest badge, then back at her. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just a ghost." She laughed nervously and moved on. On the table sat a cream-colored envelope. I picked it up and carefully opened it. Inside was a card that read, "To our beloved daughter, Olivia. Your brilliance lights our world. Love, Mom and Dad." Something inside me shifted in that moment. Not a dramatic break, but a quiet, final release, like letting go of a rope after realizing no one was pulling from the other end. I didn't speak to my parents again that day. I didn't confront Olivia. I simply took the card, slipped it into my purse, and left without saying goodbye. No one called after me. No one seemed to notice I was gone. The train ride back to Cambridge passed in a blur. My apartment felt especially empty when I returned, the silence stretching around me like a living thing. I kicked off my heels, hung my navy dress in the closet, and sat on the edge of my bed, the graduation program still clutched in my hand. I flipped through it absently until a photo caught my eye. My parents flanking Olivia, all three beaming. The caption read, "The Reynolds family celebrates future financial leader, Olivia Reynolds." I was nowhere to be seen, not even mentioned, in the family acknowledgments section that my parents had surely sponsored. Later that night, a memory pulled me from troubled sleep. I'd dreamed of my grandmother Eleanor's lake house in New Hampshire, the weathered dock where she'd taught me to fish, the screened porch where we'd play cards during summer thunderstorms. In my dream, I'd been standing on that dock, but the house behind me was empty, windows dark and shuttered. Fully awake now, I padded to my home office and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside was a folder labeled Gran's Things, papers she'd given me before her death 3 years ago. Among birthday cards and handwritten recipes was an envelope I hadn't opened since her funeral. "For Emma," it read in her flowing script, "to be opened when you need to remember who you are." Inside was a letter and a copy of what appeared to be legal documents. The letter was brief but clear. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and perhaps things haven't gone as I'd hoped. Your grandfather and I always saw something special in you, a quiet strength, an honesty that reminded me of him. The lake house was his gift to me, and now it's my gift to you, along with the trust fund we established in your name. $300,000 isn't a fortune, but it's enough to give you choices. The attached documents confirm this arrangement." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Your parents are aware of my wishes. Trust your instincts, always. All my love, Gran." I stared at the trust document, dated just 6 months before her death. It clearly named me as the sole beneficiary of both the lake house property and the accompanying trust fund. But this didn't align with what my father had told me after the funeral, that Gran had left everything to the family collectively with him as trustee. Sleep was impossible after that. I pulled out my laptop and began searching through old emails, looking for any mention of the lake house or the trust. Around 3 a.m., I remembered something that sent a chill through me. I still had access to my parents' cloud storage account. Years ago, I'd helped my father set up digital storage for the family foundation, and my login had never been revoked. I hesitated only briefly before entering my credentials. The account was still active. Most of the folders contained things I expected: tax documents, property deeds, foundation reports. But one folder labeled Reynolds Trust Restructuring caught my attention. Inside were scanned documents dated just 6 months after Gran's death. The first was a property transfer for the lake house from the Eleanor Reynolds Trust to Reynolds Family Holdings, LLC, with my signature on it. Except it wasn't my signature. The loops were wrong, the slant too steep. Someone had forged my name. Another document showed the dissolution of my individual trust fund and the consolidation of assets into the main family trust, again with my falsified signature. According to the paperwork, I had voluntarily relinquished my inheritance. The final document was the most damning, an email exchange between my parents. "Are you sure Emma won't find out about the transfer?" Eleanor was very specific. "Dad, she's too busy with that nonprofit work to check legal records. By the time the new trust structure is finalized, it will be too late." "Mom," I sat back, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was fraud. And I had the evidence. The next morning, I went to work as usual. At the environmental nonprofit where I managed donor relations, no one mentioned my sister's graduation. Why would they? I rarely spoke about my family life. But as I moved through the day, responding to emails and joining conference calls, I felt like I was operating on autopilot, my mind consumed with what I'd discovered. During lunch, I noticed a colleague scrolling through social media. She angled her phone toward me. "Your sister's graduation looked amazing. I saw your mom posted about it. The Reynolds family's next generation leader or something?" On the screen was a photo from yesterday's reception. My parents, Olivia, assorted relatives and business associates, all raising champagne glasses in a toast. The caption read, "Celebrating our daughter and the consolidated future of the Reynolds legacy." It was quite an event, I replied neutrally, returning to my salad. That evening, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the public library and used their computers to search county property records. Sure enough, the lake house that should have been mine was now listed under Reynolds Family Holdings, LLC, with my parents as the sole managers. According to the transfer date, the property had changed hands just 3 months after Gran's funeral. I dug deeper. Reynolds Family Holdings had taken out a substantial equity loan against the property last year. The funds, almost exactly $300,000, had been transferred to a new business venture, Olivia Reynolds Investment Partners, LLC. They hadn't just taken my inheritance. They'd used it to finance my sister's startup. Rain was falling as I left the library, gentle at first, then heavier as I walked to my car. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, listening to water drum against the roof, organizing my thoughts. This wasn't about jealousy or sibling rivalry. This was about theft, forgery, and betrayal on a level I still couldn't fully comprehend. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd made a decision. I collected the documents from Gran, printed my findings from the cloud account, and placed everything in a folder. Then I called the only attorney I knew personally, Jessica Patel, who had done some pro bono work for my nonprofit. "I need help," I said when she answered. "It's complicated, and it's personal." Jessica agreed to meet me for coffee the next morning. I slept better that night than I had in months. Over lattes at a quiet cafe, I laid out the documents for Jessica. She listened without interruption, occasionally marking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. "This is serious, Emma. Forgery, misappropriation of funds, breach of fiduciary duty. But proving it won't be easy, especially against someone with your parents' resources." "I have the original documents from Gran," I said, "and the forged signatures don't match mine." "That's a start," Jessica nodded, "but we'll need more." "Do you have any witnesses? Anyone who knew your grandmother's intentions?" I thought for a moment. "Aunt Claudia. She and Gran were close, and she was there when Gran gave me those papers." "Good. We should talk to her. In the meantime, don't confront your parents. Don't let them know you're investigating. And certainly don't mention the cloud account. That's our best source of evidence right now." For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was Emma, the marketing specialist, attending meetings and writing grant proposals. By night, I became a detective in my own family drama, combing through digital records, taking screenshots, building a case. I reached out to Aunt Claudia, careful, to keep my tone casual when I invited her to lunch. We met at a small restaurant near her Brookline home. After some pleasant catching up, I gently steered the conversation toward Gran. "I've been thinking about her a lot lately," I said, "especially the lake house." Claudia's expression shifted, subtly. "It was a special place." "She wanted me to have it," I said, watching her face carefully. Claudia looked down at her plate. "I know she did, Emma. But I don't have it. I never did." A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Claudia sighed. "Your father said you'd agreed to put it into the family trust. For tax purposes." "I never agreed to anything," I said quietly. "My signature was forged." Claudia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Emma, are you sure?" I pulled out a copy of the transfer document and my driver's license, placing them side by side on the table. "Look at the signatures." She studied them, then closed her eyes briefly. "What are you going to do?" "I need to know what Gran told you, about her wishes for me." Claudia hesitated, then reached for her purse. She withdrew a small envelope. "I've carried this since the funeral. Eleanor asked me to give it to you if anything seemed wrong with the inheritance. I should have given it to you sooner, but Diane, your mother, she can be so persuasive, and family loyalty is—" She trailed off, pushing the envelope toward me. Inside was a handwritten note from Gran, dated 1 week before her death. "Claudia, ensure Emma receives her inheritance intact. Robert and Diane may try to redirect it. The lake house and $300,000 are hers alone. I've made copies of all documents. Trust fund account 44289957 in her name only." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Will you help me?" I asked. Claudia nodded slowly. "Eleanor would haunt me if I didn't. What do you need?" "A statement about what you know, and possibly testimony, if this goes to court." The word court hung heavily between us. Claudia paled slightly but straightened her shoulders. For Eleanor and for you, yes. Armed with Claudia's statement and the growing file of evidence, Jessica began preparing a legal case. She suggested we start with a formal demand letter before filing suit. Give them a chance to make this right, she advised, though based on what you've told me, I doubt they will. The letter was sent by certified mail to both the family home and my father's office. Its language was precise and damning: acknowledgement of forgery, return of property, restoration of funds, and a formal apology, or face legal action for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. A week passed with no response. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, "Evening," my mother called. It was the first time we'd spoken since the graduation. "Emma," she said, her voice brittle, "this little tantrum needs to stop." "It's not a tantrum, Mother. It's a legal matter." "Don't be dramatic. The restructuring was for everyone's benefit. The family's legacy." "You forged my signature," I interrupted. "You stole property that Gran explicitly left to me." "Borrowed," she corrected. "We leveraged assets that weren't being utilized. Olivia's business is a family investment. It wasn't yours to leverage. We're having a family dinner Thursday night," she said, changing tactics. "Come, and we can discuss this rationally, without lawyers, turning a family matter into a public spectacle." I hesitated. Jessica had advised against meeting them alone. "Olivia will be there," my mother added. "She's quite upset by all this." Guilt, my mother's favorite tool. I agreed to the dinner but texted Jessica immediately after. She instructed me to record the conversation if legal in my state, it was, and to bring copies, not originals, of any documents. Thursday evening found me parking outside my parents' Beacon Hill townhouse, rain dampening my hair as I hurried to the door. Diane answered, perfectly composed in a cashmere sweater and pearls, as if we were having a routine family gathering rather than addressing fraud. "Emma?" She offered her cheek for a kiss that I didn't give. "Everyone's in the dining room." My father and Olivia sat at the long mahogany table, tension evident in their postures. Olivia offered a small, uncertain smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Em," she said softly. "Thanks for coming." My father didn't stand. "Let's get this straightened out," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Your mother tells me you've been making some outlandish accusations." I remained standing. "They're not accusations, they're facts. You forged my signature to steal my inheritance." "Reallocated," he corrected, echoing my mother's earlier euphemism. "For the benefit of the family as a whole." "And by family as a whole, you mean Olivia's business?" Olivia flinched. "I didn't know, Em. About the signatures, I mean. Dad said—" "You'd agreed—" "Stop talking, Olivia," my mother cut in sharply. She turned to me. "What exactly do you want, Emma? Money? Is that it? Name a reasonable figure and we can put this nonsense behind us." I placed my folder on the table and withdrew Gran's original letter, along with the trust documents naming me as beneficiary. "I want what's legally mine, the lake house and my trust fund." My father scoffed. "That house has been leveraged for Olivia's business. It's not as simple as just giving it back." "Then unleverage it," I said firmly, "and return the $300,000. "Impossible," my mother said. "The money has been invested, and the business is doing well. You should be proud of your sister." I looked at Olivia, who couldn't meet my eyes. "Did you know the money came from my trust fund?" She fidgeted with her napkin. "Dad said it was from the family trust, that it was restructured with everyone's agreement." "Well, I never agreed," I replied. "And now you have a choice, all of you. Make this right or I'll see you in court." My father's face darkened. "You would drag the Reynolds name through a public lawsuit? Over what? A summer house and some money you didn't earn?" "I didn't earn it," I acknowledged. "Gran gave it to me, just like she gave you your first real—" Estate investment, Dad. The difference is, no one stole yours. The room fell silent. My mother was the first to recover. Emma, be reasonable. What would people say? Think of the foundation, the family reputation. You should have thought of that before you committed fraud. My father stood abruptly. I think you should leave. When you're ready to discuss this rationally without threats and accusations, we'll talk. I gathered my documents. My attorney will be in touch. You have until the end of the month to respond. As I turned to leave, Olivia called after me. Em, wait, please, can't we work this out? I paused at the doorway. This isn't about you and me, Liv. It's about right and wrong. They made their choice. Now they can live with the consequences. The next morning, I received a text from Olivia asking to meet privately. Against Jessica's advice, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. Olivia looked exhausted, her usual polished appearance frayed at the edges. I've been up all night, she admitted. Looking through the business documents, the funding sources. You're right, Em. The money came from your trust. I had no idea. And the lake house? She nodded miserably. The equity loan was used as startup capital. But Em, I'll pay you back. Every cent. I just need time. It's not just about the money. Liv, they forged my signature. They lied to everyone, including you. And that speech at your graduation, publicly cutting me out of the family, that was deliberate. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know they were going to do that. I swear. I was horrified. But you didn't stop it. You didn't say anything. I know, she whispered. I was a coward. I've always been a coward when it comes to them. I understood then something I'd never fully grasped before. Olivia might have been the favorite, but she was just as trapped as I was. Maybe more so by the weight of their expectations. What are you going to do? I asked. She squared her shoulders. The right thing. Finally. 2 days later, Jessica called. Your parents' attorney reached out. They want to meet. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at Jessica's office. Neutral territory. My parents arrived with their lawyer, Walter Green, a man who had worked with my father for decades. Olivia came separately, without legal representation. Jessica laid out our evidence methodically. Gran's original documents, the forged transfers, Aunt Claudia's written statement, the bank records showing the movement of funds. Throughout the presentation, my mother's expression remained frozen in dignified disbelief, while my father grew increasingly flushed. When Jessica finished, Walter cleared his throat. These are serious allegations. However, the signatures appear to be notarized, which creates a presumption of validity. By a notary who has since surrendered her license, Jessica countered. We've already spoken with her. She's prepared to testify that she never witnessed Emma signing these documents. My father shifted uncomfortably. Walter leaned over to whisper something to him, but before he could respond, Olivia spoke up. I have something to add, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. She placed a flash drive on the table. These are recordings and emails from the past 3 years. They show discussions about redirecting Emma's inheritance, plans for the consolidation of family assets, and explicit mentions of keeping certain transactions hidden from Emma. The room went utterly still. My mother turned to Olivia, her face a mask of betrayal. What have you done? The right thing, Olivia replied, not looking at her. Finally. Walter examined the contents of the flash drive on his laptop, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. After a hushed consultation with my parents, he addressed Jessica. My clients would like to propose a settlement. The terms were straightforward. Return of the lake house to my name, reimbursement of the full $300,000 plus interest, a signed admission of wrongdoing, and a legally binding agreement to cease any further interference with my inheritance. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges or make the matter public. As Jessica reviewed the document, my father finally spoke directly to me. "I hope you're satisfied," he said, his voice low. "This performance has damaged this family irreparably." "You did that," I replied calmly. "Not me." My mother remained silent, her gaze fixed on Olivia. The betrayal she felt most keenly wasn't what they had done to me, but what Olivia had done to her, chosen truth over loyalty. Jessica pronounced the settlement acceptable with a few modifications. As the lawyers finalized the language, I stepped out into the hallway for air. Olivia followed me. "I'm sorry," she said. "For everything, for not standing up for you sooner." "Why did you?" I asked. "Stand up for me now, I mean." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember what Gran used to tell us? About the difference between a name and a legacy?" I nodded. "Gran had often said a name is what others call you, but a legacy is what you leave behind." "I don't want my legacy to be built on theft," Olivia continued. "I thought I was earning their approval, but I was just becoming someone I don't respect." 2 months later, I stood on the dock of the lake house, my lake house, watching the afternoon sun sparkle on the water. The property had been officially returned to my name the previous week. The money had been transferred to a new account, one my parents had no access to. I'd taken a leave of absence from work to spend the summer here, restoring what had been neglected. The porch railings needed sanding, the garden was overgrown, and the dock required new boards. All tasks Gran and I used to do together. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the settlement meeting. They had signed the papers, transferred the property and funds, and retreated into silence. I didn't expect an apology, and none came. Olivia visited occasionally. Our relationship was fragile but healing. She had separated her business from our parents' influence, taking on debt rather than using their money. It was harder this way, she said, but cleaner. As for the $300,000, I had plans. Some would go toward renovating the lake house. The rest would fund a new project, a summer camp for kids who, like me, needed to be reminded of their value beyond family expectations. Gran would have approved. One evening, as sunset painted the lake in shades of orange and pink, I sat on the newly repaired dock with a letter in my hand, one final document from Jessica. It was confirmation that my parents had formally removed the statements from my sister's graduation program before it was archived, acknowledging that their claims about the sole beneficiary were false. It wasn't a dramatic vindication. No. Courtroom fell silent. No public apology was issued, just a quiet correction of the record. And somehow, that was enough. I folded the letter and tucked it away in Gran's old writing desk, alongside her recipes and birthday cards. Then I walked back to the dock and sat with my feet dangling in the cool water, watching as fireflies began to appear along the shoreline. Names and inheritances matter, but they don't define us. What defines us are the choices we make when faced with injustice, whether we stay silent or speak truth, whether we accept erasure or insist on being seen. My parents gave my sister my $300,000 inheritance. But in the end, I gained something far more valuable, the power of standing up for what's right, even when it means standing alone. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people who should protect you most. But healing doesn't mean pretending. It never happened. It means reclaiming what was always yours, your voice, your worth, your place in the world. Have you ever had to stand up against family for what's right? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And remember to subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with a story about confronting my mother's secret second family that will leave you speechless. The morning after the graduation ceremony, I woke to sunlight streaming through my blinds and the distant sound of traffic outside my Cambridge apartment. For a moment, just a brief second before full consciousness took hold, everything felt normal. Then the memories rushed back. The public disowning, the guest badge, the family photo where I had no place. I reached for my phone, half expecting, Messages from someone, Olivia perhaps, or even Aunt Claudia, explaining or apologizing. The screen showed nothing but app notifications and a weather alert. Not even a text asking if I'd made it home safely. In the shower, I let hot water cascade over my shoulders, trying to wash away the hollow feeling in my chest. This wasn't the first time I'd been excluded, I reminded myself. My absence from family events had been so gradual that I'd almost stopped noticing. First, it was being seated at the far end of holiday dinner tables, then forgetting to include me in the annual Christmas card photo, then not receiving certain invitations at all. "We didn't think you'd be interested," my mother would say, or "It was just a small gathering," even when social media revealed otherwise. By the time I finished dressing, I'd settled into a familiar, emotional numbness, the protective shell I'd cultivated for years. I made coffee and carried my mug to the small balcony overlooking a courtyard where a neighbor's cat prowled between potted plants. The ordinary morning felt surreal after yesterday's public rejection. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Rachel from work. "You still good to present at the donor lunch today? No pressure if you need a day." I'd completely forgotten about the presentation. As the newest member of the development team at EcoFuture, I was scheduled to outline our watershed protection initiative to potential donors. Any other day, I would have spent the morning reviewing my notes and practicing my talking points. Today, I could barely remember what the presentation was about. "I'll be there," I typed back. Work had always been my refuge, the place where I was valued for what I contributed rather than how well I fit into a predetermined role. As I gathered my laptop and notes, a memory surfaced. My father's voice at a family dinner years ago. "Emma lacks focus. She takes these nonprofit jobs because they're easy. No real pressure to achieve." He'd said it casually, not even addressing me directly, just sharing an observation with my mother as if I weren't sitting right there. I pushed the memory away and headed to the office. The presentation went better than expected. I spoke about water conservation with passion and clarity, and 3 potential donors requested follow-up meetings. My boss, Marianne, caught me in the hallway afterward. "That was excellent, Emma. You really connect with people." The compliment should have lifted my spirits, but it only highlighted the contrast between my professional competence and personal rejection. Why could strangers see value in me when my own family couldn't? That evening, I found myself pulling out an old family photo album I rarely opened. It was bound in burgundy leather with the Reynolds family embossed in gold on the cover, a gift from my parents on my 16th birthday. At the time, I'd been touched by the gesture, not yet understanding it was less about celebrating me and more about reinforcing family identity. I turned the pages slowly, tracing the visual history of my gradual erasure. In early photos, I stood firmly between my parents, Olivia and I often in matching outfits despite our 3-year age difference. By middle school, the positioning had shifted, Olivia central, me slightly off to the side. High school photos showed an even more pronounced pattern, with several formal portraits featuring just my parents and Olivia. There was one photo that captured the shift perfectly. It was from Olivia's high school graduation, 8 years ago. The original shot had included me. I remembered the photographer directing us to stand on the school lawn, remembered my mother instructing me to smooth my hair before the flash. But in the version that made it into the album, I had been cropped out. Only my hand remained visible on Olivia's shoulder, a disembodied appendage at the edge of the frame. I stared at that phantom hand for a long time. They hadn't completely removed me. That would have required more sophisticated editing. Instead, they'd simply cut the photo, leaving just enough of me to make the composition look natural while ensuring I wasn't really there. Beneath the photo, a handwritten caption read, "Our pride and joy graduates with honors." Singular, not plural. I continued turning pages, noting how family vacation photos rarely included me beyond the early years. By the time I reached college, I appeared primarily in candid shots, never the formal portraits used for holiday cards or foundation publicity. Near the back of the album, I found the program from my own college graduation. Unlike yesterday's spectacle, neither of my parents had spoken at the ceremony. They had attended, arrived late, and left early, explaining they had a foundation dinner that evening. No celebration dinner, no party, just a card with a modest check and my mother's neat handwriting. "Congratulations. We know you'll find your way." I closed the album and returned it to the shelf. This pattern wasn't new. Yesterday had simply made public what had been happening privately for years. My phone rang, startling me. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Emma? It's Walter Green, my father's attorney." I straightened involuntarily. "What can I do for you, Mr. Green?" "Your father asked me to call regarding yesterday's announcement. He wants to clarify that this decision doesn't affect your regular holiday stipend." Holiday stipend. The quarterly deposits my parents had started making after I took my nonprofit job. Not enough to significantly help with Boston's cost of living, but enough to create a sense of obligation. "I see," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "And this couldn't wait until business hours tomorrow?" Robert wanted to ensure there were no misunderstandings. "The family still supports your chosen path." The condescension in his tone made my skin crawl. My chosen path had always been framed as a disappointment. Noble, perhaps, but beneath the Reynolds standard of success. "Thank you for the clarification," I said. "Is there anything else?" A slight pause. "Your mother suggests you might want to limit discussion of family matters in professional contexts, for everyone's benefit." The implication was clear. Keep quiet about the public disowning. Preserve the family image. "I'll take that under advisement," I replied, and ended the call. I sat in the dark of my apartment for a long time afterward, turning over Walter's words. They weren't concerned about my feelings or reputation. They were worried I might tarnish theirs. That night, I dreamed of the lake house, not as it appeared in family photos, but as I remembered it from childhood visits with Gran. The worn path leading down to the water, the squeak of the screen door, the smell of pine and lake water. In the dream, I was searching for something in the boathouse. Something Gran had told me was hidden there, but every drawer I opened was empty. I woke feeling unsettled, Gran's voice echoing in my mind. Some things are kept safe by being kept secret. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to New Hampshire. The trip to the lake house took just under 2 hours, the familiar route bringing back memories of summer vacations and weekend getaways. As I turned onto the private road leading to the property, my stomach tightened. What if they had changed the locks? What if someone else was there? The house came into view, its weathered cedar shingles and blue shutters exactly as I remembered. No cars in the driveway, no signs of recent occupation. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering courage. This had been Gran's sanctuary for over 40 years. The place where she'd taught me to fish, to row, to identify constellations on clear summer nights. The place she'd promised would someday be mine. I found the spare key in its hiding place, a small compartment in the boathouse that my father had never bothered to learn about. Gran had shown it to me the summer before she died, winking as she did so. "Sometimes a woman needs her own keys to her own doors," she'd said. The house smelled musty, unlived in. I walked through slowly, noting changes from my last visit to years ago. New furniture in the living room, sleek, modern pieces that clashed with the rustic architecture. Gran's collection of hand-thrown pottery was gone from the mantel, replaced by abstract sculptures. In the kitchen, her worn butcher block had been swapped for granite countertops. They had erased her just as thoroughly as they had erased me. Upstairs, I found more changes. The bedroom that had always been mine had been converted to a home office, complete with a glass desk and ergonomic chair. Olivia's room remained a bedroom, but had been redecorated in neutral tones, all traces of her teenage personality removed. The master bedroom, Gran's room, had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Her quilts and watercolor landscapes were gone, replaced by hotel-like blandness, white bedding, beige walls, generic artwork. On impulse, I opened the closet where Gran had kept a fireproof lockbox. It was gone, of course. They would have removed anything important after she died. I continued exploring, looking for any trace of the house I remembered. In the dining room, a new china cabinet stood where Gran's bookshelf had been. I opened it out of curiosity and found it filled with formal dinnerware I didn't recognize. Certainly not Gran's mismatched collection of blue willow plates. Behind the cabinet, barely visible, was a small door, the entrance to a storage space under the stairs. I moved the furniture aside and tried the handle. Locked. For a moment, I considered leaving it alone. This wasn't my house anymore, despite what Gran had intended. But something about the hidden door tugged at my memory. Gran showing me a secret compartment, her voice low as if sharing a conspiracy. The important things stay hidden until they're needed. I ran my fingers along the doorframe, feeling for the spot she had shown me. There, a small depression in the wood. I pressed, and a tiny panel slid open, revealing a key. The door creaked as I pushed it open, releasing the smell of old paper and cedar. The space was small, just big enough to crawl into and lined with shelves. Most were empty, but one held a dusty wooden box with Eleanor carved into the lid. My hands trembled as I lifted it. Inside were papers, old letters, photographs, legal documents. At the bottom, in a sealed envelope with my name written in Gran's, flowing script, was a key with a luggage tag attached. Safety deposit box. First National, Portsmouth. Box 247. I replaced everything but the envelope, closed the box, and returned it to its shelf. Then I relocked the door, moved the china cabinet back into position, and left the house as I had found it. The drive to Portsmouth took another 40 minutes. I felt oddly calm, as if following a map Gran had left specifically for me. The bank manager was initially skeptical when I presented the key and my ID, but after verifying that I was listed as an authorized user, he led me to a private room where the box was brought. Inside were more documents, the original deed to the lake, house showing Gran as sole owner, her will naming me as the beneficiary of both the property and a trust fund, and a letter addressed to me, dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Emma," it began, "if you're reading this, I fear Robert and Diane have not honored my wishes. They never approved of how much time I spent with you, how much of myself I saw in you. They preferred Olivia because she was easier to mold into their image of success. But you, my darling, have your grandfather's spirit, questioning, independent, unwilling to be shaped by others' expectations." I blinked back tears as I continued reading. "The lake house is yours. The trust fund is yours. $300,000 isn't a fortune in today's world, but it's enough to give you freedom to pursue the work that matters to you without bending to their financial control. I've left copies of these documents with my attorney, Bernard Weston, though I suspect Robert may have convinced him to lose them by now. That's why I've created this backup plan." The letter went on to detail the extent of my inheritance and Gran's reasons for leaving it specifically to me. "Olivia will be well provided for by your parents," she wrote. "She doesn't need my help to find her place in the world. You are stronger than she is in many ways, but it's your strength they resent. It reminds them too much of me." The final paragraph struck me like a physical blow. "If they've taken what is rightfully yours, fight for it. Not out of greed or spite, but because allowing them to erase your claim is allowing them to erase you. And no one, my darling girl, has that right." I carefully gathered the documents, made copies at the bank's service desk, and secured the originals back in the safety deposit box. Then I called Jessica Patel. "I need to see you," I said when she answered. "I've found something important." We met at her office late that afternoon. Jessica listened attentively as I explained my discovery, examining the copies of Gran's documents with a practiced eye. "These strengthen our position considerably," she said, "but we still need to establish that the transfer documents with your signature are forgeries." "They are," I insisted. "I never signed anything." "I believe you, Emma, but we need to prove it." She tapped her pen against the desk thoughtfully. "Do you know who notarized the transfers?" I examined the copies I'd previously found in my parents' cloud storage. "Meredith Dawson," I read. "That name sounds familiar." "It should. She works for your father's company, or did until last year." Jessica made a note. "We'll need to speak with her." "Will that be difficult?" "Possibly, but there's leverage we can use. Notaries who knowingly authenticate forged signatures can lose their commission and face criminal charges." I left Jessica's office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about reclaiming what had been systematically taken from me. Not just my inheritance, but my place in my own life story. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jessica hired a handwriting expert to analyze the signatures on the transfer documents. I combed through years of emails and text messages, looking for any mention of the lake house or trust fund. And we prepared to contact Meredith Dawson. We didn't have to. She called Jessica's office the day after we began our investigation. "I understand you're looking into some documents I notarized for the Reynolds family," she said when Jessica put the call on speaker. Her voice was tense, defensive. "That's correct," Jessica replied neutrally. "Specifically, property transfers and trust dissolutions bearing Emma Reynolds' signature." A long pause. "What do you want to know?" "Did you witness Ms. Reynolds signing these documents?" Another pause. "I'd rather not answer that without my own legal representation." Jessica leaned forward. "Ms. Dawson, let me be clear. My client never signed these documents. If you falsely notarized her signature, that's fraud. However, if you're willing to provide a statement acknowledging what happened, we might be able to focus our legal actions solely on the parties who instructed you to commit notary fraud." The line went silent for so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, Diane Reynolds brought me the documents. She said Emma had already signed them but wasn't available for the notarization. I knew it was wrong, but you don't say no to Diane Reynolds. "We'll need that in writing," Jessica said. "And you may need to testify if this goes to court." "Will I lose my notary commission?" "Possibly. But cooperating now may help mitigate other consequences." After the call ended, Jessica turned to me. "This is good, really good. With Meredith's statement and the handwriting analysis, we can prove the transfers were fraudulent. The next step is confronting your parents directly." "They'll deny everything," I said, "or claim it was a misunderstanding." "Probably. But with the evidence mounting, they may decide a quiet settlement is preferable to a messy court battle. The Reynolds Foundation can't afford that kind of publicity." She was right, of course. My parents had built their social and professional identities on the foundation's reputation for integrity and family values. A lawsuit alleging fraud would undermine everything they'd constructed. That evening, I received a text from Olivia. "Heard you visited the lake house yesterday. What's going on?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Olivia had always straddled the line between ally and competitor. As children, we'd been close in the way siblings often are, sharing secrets, building forts by the lake, rolling our eyes at our parents' pretensions. But as we grew older and our paths diverged, she toward the business world our parents valued, me toward nonprofit work they dismissed, the gap between us had widened. Had she known about the forged documents? About Gran's real intentions? Or was she just another piece on my parents' chessboard? Just revisiting old memories, I texted back, deliberately vague. How are things at the new firm? Her response came quickly. Busy, stressful. Dad's been acting weird since graduation. Is everything okay between you two? I nearly laughed at the question. How could anything be okay after a public disowning? As okay as it's ever been, I replied. We have different priorities. Mom mentioned something about restructuring the trust. She said you were upset about it. So there it was. They were already laying groundwork, creating a narrative where I was merely upset about administrative changes rather than robbed of my inheritance. It's complicated, I wrote back. Maybe we could talk in person sometime. Sure, coffee next week? I'm swamped until then. We set a date, and I put down my phone, wondering where Olivia would stand when everything came to light. Would she side with our parents as she usually did? Or would learning about their deception create a crack in her perfect daughter facade? The following morning, I woke to an email from my mother. The subject line read simply, Disappointment. Emma, it began with no greeting. It has come to our attention that you're speaking with people outside the family about private financial matters. This is exactly the kind of behavior that reinforces our decision to streamline the Reynolds legacy. If you have concerns, bring them to us directly rather than involving strangers in family business. The email continued with a thinly veiled threat. Your quarterly stipend is a privilege, not a right. Please remember that your lifestyle depends on family generosity, not your modest nonprofit salary. The final line was pure Diane Reynolds. We raised you to show more loyalty and discretion, prove that our efforts weren't entirely wasted. No signature, no closing pleasantry, just cold disappointment and financial threats. I forwarded the email to Jessica, who responded within minutes. Classic intimidation. She's worried. This strengthens our position. Later that day, I visited my apartment building's management office and requested a security review of my unit. If my parents were willing to forge my signature once, what else might they do? The property manager seemed confused by my request, but agreed to check the locks and confirm that no duplicate keys had been issued without my knowledge. Paranoid? Perhaps. But years of subtle gaslighting had taught me to trust my instincts about my parents' capacity for intrusion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Gran's letter, about her warning that my parents resented my strength. I'd never thought of myself as particularly strong. If anything, I'd spent years doubting myself, wondering why I could never quite meet their expectations. But looking back at the pattern, the gradual exclusion, the backhanded compliments, the constant comparison to Olivia, I began to see what Gran had meant. My crime wasn't weakness, it was independence. I had chosen a career they couldn't control, built relationships outside their social circle, developed values that challenged their definition of success. I hadn't failed to live up to their standards. I had refused to accept those standards as my own. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. While searching through old family emails, I found something unexpected, a message from Gran sent 3 months before she died, with the subject line, Lake House Future. I hadn't seen it at the time. It had been sent to my old university email address, which I rarely checked after graduation. Dearest Emma, it read, I've been thinking about the future of this place. Your father wants me to transfer ownership to the family trust, but I've decided against it. This house has always been a refuge, not an asset. I want it to remain that for you when I'm gone. We'll talk more when you visit next month, but know that I've made arrangements to ensure this little corner of the world stays with the person who loves it most. I never made that visit. A foundation emergency had required all hands on deck, and my father had insisted I couldn't be spared. By the time things calmed down, Gran was in the hospital. She died before I could see her again. Had he known what she was planning? Had he deliberately kept me away? The thought sent a chill through me. I'd always viewed my exclusion from the family as emotional neglect, hurtful but not calculated. Now I had to consider a more disturbing possibility, that it had been strategic, designed to prevent me from claiming what was rightfully mine. I continued searching, methodically going through years of correspondence. In a folder of Foundation communications, I found emails discussing the consolidation of family assets following Gran's death. References to redirecting E's portion and simplifying ownership structures. My father writing to Walter Green about potential resistance and the need for clean documentation. They had planned it all. Not just the diversion of my inheritance, but the gradual erasure of my place in the family. The guest badge at graduation wasn't an oversight. It was the culmination of a years-long campaign. By the time morning light filtered through my blinds, I had compiled enough evidence to fill a legal briefcase, emails, financial statements, property records, a timeline of deliberate exclusion and calculated theft. I showered, dressed in my most professional attire, and headed to Jessica's office without an appointment. She was in a meeting when I arrived, but her assistant took one look at my face and interrupted. "I have everything we need," I told her, placing my laptop and files on her desk. They didn't just forge my signature, they planned this for years. Jessica reviewed the materials while I sat across from her, running on adrenaline and determination, despite my sleepless night. When she finally looked up, her expression was a mixture of professional calculation and personal outrage. "Emma," she said, "this is far more extensive than we initially thought. This isn't just about the lake house or the trust fund. This is a systematic pattern of financial misconduct using the family foundation as cover. What do we do?" She leaned back, considering. "We have several options. We could file a civil suit for the fraudulent transfers and seek damages. That's the most straightforward approach." I nodded, waiting for the alternatives. Or, she continued, "Given the evidence of potential tax fraud and misuse of charitable foundation funds, we could approach the state attorney general's office. That would trigger a formal investigation into the Reynolds Foundation." The implications were clear. A civil suit would focus narrowly on my inheritance. An investigation would expose every questionable financial decision my parents had made, under the foundation's umbrella. "Which would you recommend?" I asked. Jessica tapped her pen against the desk, a habit I was beginning to recognize as her thinking gesture. "Legally speaking, the civil suit is cleaner and more likely to get you what you want, your inheritance restored. An investigation might ultimately recover more, but it would be messier, more public, and would affect innocent parties associated with the foundation." "Like Olivia," I said quietly. "Yes. And employees, other family members, partner organizations." I thought about the revelations of the past few days, about the calculated nature of my parents' actions, about Gran's words. Fight for it, not out of greed or spite. "Let's start with the civil approach," I decided. "Give them one chance to make this right before we escalate." Jessica nodded approvingly. "I'll draft a demand letter today. Formal, but not inflammatory. Your parents are sophisticated enough to understand the subtext. Comply voluntarily or face worse consequences." As I left her office, I felt lighter than I had in days. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now I was walking it with my eyes open, guided by truth rather than family mythology. That afternoon, I received another text from Olivia. Just got out of a weird meeting with Dad and Walter Green. Something about family asset protection strategies. Is this related to your lake house visit? I stared at the message, weighing my response. How much did she know? How much should I tell her? "Possibly," I replied. "Better if we discuss in person. Still on for coffee next week? Actually, are you free tomorrow? This seems important." We arranged to meet at a cafe far from both our workplaces, a neutral territory where we were unlikely, to encounter family connections. As I put my phone away, I wondered if Olivia was reaching out as an ally or as my parents' proxy. Either way, I needed to be prepared. That night, I dreamed of the lake house again. But this time, instead of searching through empty drawers, I was sitting on the dock with Gran, our fishing lines trailing in the water. "You don't have to become them to beat them," she said, her voice as clear as if she were really beside me. "You just have to be more honest than they are." I woke feeling resolved, Gran's words echoing in my mind as I prepared to face whatever came next, beginning with tomorrow's conversation with Olivia. The cafe where I agreed to meet Olivia was tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, far enough from the financial district to minimize the chance of running into my father's colleagues. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a corner table that offered privacy without feeling secretive. The barista brought me a chai latte I barely tasted, my mind racing with everything I'd discovered and everything I still needed to know. Olivia arrived precisely on time, punctuality being one of the many Reynolds traits she'd absorbed without question. She wore a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. To anyone else, she would have looked like the picture of confident professionalism, but I recognized the slight furrow between her brows, the way she scanned the room before approaching, signs of the anxiety she never acknowledged. "Em," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thanks for meeting on short notice." Nodded, studying her face. "Of course. What happened with Dad and Walter?" She ordered an Americano before answering, her manicured fingers tapping lightly against the table. "It was strange. They called it a strategic planning session, but it felt more like damage control. Dad kept talking about unified family, messaging, and asset consolidation documentation. Walter took a lot of notes and looked worried. Did they mention me specifically?" Olivia hesitated. "Not by name. But Dad referred to potential challenges from outside interests and the need to present a consistent narrative about family decisions." She leaned forward slightly. "Em, what's going on? What does this have to do with the lake house?" I took a deep breath. "I found Gran's original will and trust documents. She left the lake house and a trust fund to me specifically. Not to the family trust, not to be managed by Dad. To me directly." Olivia's expression shifted subtly. Surprise. Confusion. Perhaps a flicker of something else. "Are you sure? Dad always said Gran wanted everything kept in the family collective." "I'm sure. I have the documents, notarized, witnessed, entirely legal. She also left me a letter explaining her decision." "Why wouldn't she tell everyone? Why the secrecy?" I met her gaze directly. "Because she suspected Dad and Mom would try to override her wishes. And she was right. They forged my signature on transfer documents after she died. They stole my inheritance, Liv." Olivia sat back, color draining from her face. That can't be right. There must be some misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding. I have proof. The forged documents, emails discussing how to keep me from finding out, even a statement from the notary confirming she never witnessed me signing anything." Her coffee arrived, but she ignored it. "What are you going to do?" "I've hired a lawyer, Jessica Patel. We're preparing to file a civil suit to recover what's legally mine." "A lawsuit?" Olivia's voice rose slightly before she caught herself, glancing around to ensure no one had heard. "Em, you can't sue our parents. Think about what that would do to the family, to the foundation. I'm giving them a chance to make it right, without going to court, but I won't let them keep what Gran wanted me to have." Olivia stared at her untouched coffee. "Have you considered that maybe Gran changed her mind? Made a later will?" "There is no later will. I've checked the records. Thoroughly. The document they're using is the forgery." "But why would they do this?" She sounded genuinely bewildered. "It's not like they need the money." "It's not about need, Liv. It's about control. They couldn't stand that Gran made a decision they didn't approve of, that she trusted me with something independent of their oversight. That seems extreme. Does it? Look at how they've treated me for years. The gradual exclusion from family events, the public disowning at your graduation. This is just the financial side of the same pattern. Olivia flinched at the mention of the graduation. I didn't know they were going to do that. Dad just said he wanted to make a special announcement about the future of the family business. And you never questioned why I wasn't included in that. Future? She looked down, guilt flashing across her face. I assumed it was because you chose a different path, that you weren't interested in the family legacy. That's what they wanted you to think. That's what they've been engineering for years, creating a narrative where I voluntarily stepped away rather than one where they systematically pushed me out. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. Finally, she asked, How much? What? The trust fund. How much was it? $300,000, plus the lake house. She exhaled slowly. And they used it for... I don't know yet. That's part of what I'm investigating. But given the timing, I suspect it may have funded your investment firm startup. Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes wide. What? No. Dad provided that funding from the family business account. He showed me the transfer records. Were they original documents or copies he prepared? Her silence was answer enough. Liv, I'm not doing this to hurt you, but I need to know the truth, and I think you do too. She pushed her coffee aside, untasted. I need to see these documents you're talking about. The will, the transfers, all of it. I can't just take your word that our parents committed fraud. Fair enough. I reached into my bag and withdrew a folder containing copies of everything I'd gathered. These are copies. My lawyer has the originals locked in her office safe. Olivia took the folder but didn't open it. I'll need time to review these, and probably to have someone independent verify them. Of course. But Liv, don't take them to Walter Green or anyone else connected to Dad. They're already in damage control mode. You need objective analysis. She nodded slowly. I know someone from law school. She specializes in estate law, no connections to the Reynolds name. She stood, tucking the folder into her sleek leather briefcase. I'll call you after I've reviewed everything. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Liv. She paused. Whatever you find, remember that I'm not the enemy here. A complex emotion crossed her face, something between doubt and recognition. I'll be in touch, was all she said before walking away. I remained at the cafe for another hour, replaying the conversation. Olivia's reaction had been largely what I expected. Initial disbelief, the instinct to defend our parents, reluctance to accept such a fundamental betrayal. But beneath that, I'd sensed something else. A flicker of recognition, perhaps even the first cracks in her perfect daughter facade. The afternoon stretched before me, and I found myself reluctant to return to my apartment with its solitary silence. Instead, I walked to the nearby bookstore, meandering through shelves of fiction and travel guides, anonymous among other browsers. In the business section, a hardcover caught my eye. Ethical Wealth: Building Financial Legacy Without Losing Your Soul. The author's photo showed a smiling middle-aged man with kind eyes. I checked the back cover and felt a jolt of recognition. At the bio, Bernard Weston, attorney and estate planner. Bernard Weston, Gran's attorney. The one she'd mentioned in her letter, who she suspected might have been convinced to lose her documents. I purchased the book immediately and found a quiet corner in the store's small cafe to examine it. The publication date was recent, less than a year ago. In the acknowledgments, Weston thanked his clients who taught me that true legacy is measured in values, not valuations. Using the bookstore's Wi-Fi, I searched for information about Weston. His law practice specialized in estate planning for charitable givers, with offices in downtown Boston. According to a recent profile in Boston Magazine, he had largely retired from active practice but still consulted on complex philanthropic estates and had written his book after witnessing too many families destroy relationships over inheritance disputes. I called Jessica from outside the bookstore. "Bernard Weston," I said when she answered. "He was Gran's attorney. We need to talk to him." "Weston?" Jessica sounded surprised. "He's well respected in estate planning circles. Semi-retired now, I think." Gran mentioned him in her letter. She thought my father might have pressured him somehow, but if he's still around, he might have information about the original will and what happened after she died. "It's worth exploring," Jessica agreed. "I'll reach out through professional channels, see if he'll agree to meet with us. But Emma, be prepared for disappointment. Attorneys typically maintain client confidentiality even after death, and if he did succumb to pressure from your father once, he might not be eager to revisit the situation." "Just try," I urged. "He might be our best chance at understanding exactly what happened." After hanging up, I walked through the city with no particular destination, the book tucked into my bag like a talisman. Boston hummed around me, people rushing between meetings or lingering over late lunches, unaware of how foundations were shifting beneath my feet. How does one process the realization that their own parents are capable of criminal deception? That years of distance and disappointment weren't happenstance but calculated maneuvers? My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Weston agreed to meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., his home office in Cambridge. Says he remembers Eleanor Reynolds well." A surge of hope rose in me, the first I'd felt since discovering the forged documents. If Weston had information about Gran's true intentions, it could be pivotal for our case. That evening, I received another email from my mother. Unlike the previous message, this one adopted a tone of concerned puzzlement. "Emma, darling, I understand. You've been asking questions about Eleanor's estate arrangements. If you had concerns, you should have come to us directly rather than causing disruption. Your father is quite upset about what he considers a breach of family trust. Perhaps we could meet for lunch this weekend to clear the air?" The lake house. "Matters are complex, but I'm sure we can reach an understanding if we speak face to face." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. For years, they had excluded me from family decisions, dismissed my input, and literally forged my signature on legal documents. Now that they sensed a threat, suddenly I was darling and worthy of direct conversation. I forwarded the email to Jessica with a simple note. "They know we're investigating." Her response was immediate. "Expected. Don't meet with them alone under any circumstances. All communication should go through me now." I drafted a brief, neutral reply to my mother. "Thank you for the invitation. At this point, any discussions about Gran's estate should include my legal representation. Jessica Patel will be in touch to arrange a meeting if appropriate." I hovered over the send button, anticipating the fury this would provoke. Diane Reynolds did not appreciate being redirected to underlings, which is exactly how she would view my attorney. But maintaining emotional distance was crucial now. I pressed send and immediately blocked both my parents' numbers on my phone. Any urgent communication could go through Jessica. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake reading Bernard Weston's book, searching for insights into the man we would meet tomorrow. His writing was thoughtful and direct, with frequent references to the emotional toll of inheritance disputes. One passage in particular caught my attention. "In my 40 years of practice, I've observed that families who attempt to control adult children through financial manipulation inevitably destroy the very legacy they claim to protect. True inheritance is not just assets but values, and no value is more fundamental than honesty." By morning, I'd finished the book and felt cautiously optimistic about our meeting. Weston's emphasis on ethical estate planning suggested a man of principle, someone who might have been uncomfortable with my parents' maneuvering. I dressed carefully for the meeting, professional but not ostentatious, nothing that would remind Weston of my mother's calculated polish. Jessica and I met for coffee beforehand to align our approach. Let me lead the questioning, she advised. Weston agreed to meet as a courtesy, not as part of a formal deposition. We want him comfortable enough to share what he knows. What if he was complicit? I asked. What if he helped them bury Gran's real will? Jessica considered this. Then, we observe, gather what information we can, and adjust our strategy accordingly. But my instinct says he's meeting us because something about this situation has bothered him. People don't usually revisit professional decisions they're comfortable with. Bernard Weston's home office was on the first floor of a Victorian in Sao, Cambridge, with a separate entrance and a discreet brass plaque beside the door. The man who greeted us had silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, his manner courteous but reserved. He led us to a sitting area with leather chairs arranged around a coffee table, rather than the formal desk I had expected. Ms. Patel. He nodded. To Jessica. And you must be Emma Reynolds. You have your grandmother's eyes. You remember Gran well? I asked, settling into a chair. Eleanor was a remarkable woman. Clear-minded, forthright, deeply committed to her principles. He adjusted his glasses. I was sorry to hear of her passing. Mr. Weston, Jessica began, we appreciate you meeting with us. As I mentioned on the phone, we're investigating discrepancies in Eleanor Reynolds' estate execution. Weston nodded slowly. You're referring to the Lake House property and trust fund. The direct acknowledgement surprised me. Yes, I confirmed. Gran left me a letter explaining that she intended those assets to come to me directly, outside the family trust. But after her death, documents appeared showing I had transferred everything to Reynolds Family Holdings. Documents you never signed, Weston stated rather than asked. Jessica leaned forward slightly. Mr. Weston, what can you tell us about Eleanor Reynolds' final estate plan? He was quiet for a moment, seemingly weighing his words. Attorney-client, privilege survives death, he began. However, as the intended beneficiary named in Eleanor's will, Emma has a right to certain information. He turned to me directly. Your grandmother came to me approximately 6 months before her passing. She was concerned about what she called troubling patterns in your parents' behavior toward you. My throat tightened at this confirmation. She saw what was happening. Eleanor was perceptive. She had observed how your parents were gradually excluding you from family affairs while maintaining a public image of unity. She was particularly disturbed by incidents where your academic and professional achievements were minimized or attributed to family connections rather than your own merit. Jessica interjected gently, Did Eleanor specifically discuss her intentions regarding the New Hampshire property? She was adamant that the lake house should pass directly to Emma. She had inherited it from her husband, your grandfather, and it was never part of the Reynolds family assets. The trust fund was similarly designated, $300,000 to provide Emma with financial independence from her parents. We have copies of these documents, I said. But after Gran died, my father claimed everything had been left to the family trust with him as executor. Weston removed his glasses, polishing them deliberately with a handkerchief before responding. 3 weeks after Eleanor's funeral, Robert Reynolds came to my office. He informed me that alternate estate documents had been discovered among Eleanor's papers, documents I had allegedly prepared showing her wish to consolidate all assets in the family trust. But you hadn't prepared such documents, Jessica stated. I had not. When I informed Robert of this, he suggested my memory might be failing and that perhaps my associate had handled the matter. When I insisted no such documents existed in our files, he became insistent. He implied that contradicting him could create problems for my practice and reputation. He threatened you, I translated. Weston replaced his glasses. Not explicitly. Robert Reynolds is too sophisticated for direct threats. But the implication was clear. When I maintained my position, he informed me that the Reynolds family would be transferring all their legal work to another firm, effective immediately. He then demanded Eleanor's entire file, claiming executor privilege. "Did you give it to him?" Jessica asked. "I provided copies of what was legally required, but I maintained the originals in secure storage." He rose and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. "I've been expecting someone to inquire about this matter for 3 years. I'm only sorry it's taken so long." He returned with a sealed envelope. "These are certified copies of Eleanor's final will and trust documents, exactly as she approved. Them. They clearly designate Emma as the sole beneficiary of both the lake house property and the dedicated trust fund. I've also included my contemporaneous notes from meetings with both Eleanor and, later, Robert." Jessica accepted the envelope, her expression carefully neutral despite what I knew was a significant development. "Mr. Weston, would you be willing to provide a formal statement about these events? Potentially testify if necessary?" He sat back down, folding his hands in his lap. "I've been practicing law for over 40 years, Ms. Patel. In that time, I've learned that professional loyalty must ultimately serve justice, not power. Yes, I will testify if needed." Relief washed through me. "Thank you," I said simply. "Gran trusted you. Now I understand why." "Eleanor was concerned about more than just the inheritance," Weston added. "She worried about the psychological impact of your parents' behavior. She called it erasure, the gradual removal of your presence and voice from family narrative." The word struck me physically. Erasure. It described perfectly what I'd experienced. Not dramatic rejection, but subtle, persistent deletion. "Mr. Weston," Jessica said, "did Eleanor ever mention concerns about the Reynolds Family Foundation? Any potential misuse of charitable funds or inappropriate transfers?" Weston's expression shifted subtly. "Eleanor had questions about certain foundation expenditures. She felt Robert was increasingly blurring the line between family finances and charitable activities. But she had no direct evidence of impropriety when we last spoke." Jessica made a note. "That's consistent with some patterns we're seeing in the documents Emma has gathered." "If you're considering expanding your investigation to include foundation activities," Weston said carefully, "I should note that the potential ramifications extend far beyond family dynamics. The Reynolds Foundation has significant partnerships with other charitable organizations, educational institutions, and municipal programs. We're focusing on the inheritance issues for now," I assured him. "But we can't ignore evidence of broader misconduct if we find it." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with this approach. "I should also mention that Eleanor made a recording during our final meeting, a video statement explaining her estate decisions. She wanted it preserved in case her wishes were challenged after her death." My heart leaped. "You have this recording?" "It's in secure storage with my most sensitive client files. I can retrieve it by tomorrow." This was better than I had dared hope. Gran's own words, her expressed intentions, recorded and preserved. It would be nearly impossible for my parents to argue against that. As we prepared to leave, Weston handed me a small wooden box. "Eleanor left this for you as well. She asked that I give it to you personally if questions ever arose about her estate." The box was carved with a simple pattern of leaves, its surface smooth from years of handling. Inside was a key, old-fashioned, heavy brass, and a handwritten note. "For the boathouse storage room. What's hidden is sometimes most valuable." My hands trembled slightly as I read it. The boathouse at the lake property had always been Gran's special domain. She'd spent hours there organizing fishing gear, preserving family photographs, writing in journals I wasn't allowed to read. "I've never seen this key before," I said. The boathouse had a padlock with a combination. Eleanor mentioned a hidden storage space, Weston explained. Something her husband had built when they first purchased the property. I believe she viewed it as a kind of insurance, a place to preserve what mattered most. Jessica and I left Weston's office with the envelope of documents and the wooden box, both of us quiet as we processed the implications of what we'd learned. In the car, she finally broke the silence. "This changes everything, Emma. Weston's testimony alone would be compelling, but with his contemporary notes and Eleanor's video statement, we have an extremely strong case. The forged transfers won't stand up to this level of evidence." "Will we still need to go to court?" I asked. "Possibly not. Once your parents understand what we have, they may prefer to settle quietly rather than face a public legal battle they're likely to lose." She glanced at me. "But first, I think we need to see what's in that boathouse." We agreed that I would take the morning off work tomorrow and drive to New Hampshire. Jessica would accompany me, not just for legal support, but for witnessing, whatever we might find. We also decided to invite Bernard Weston to join us, both for his connection to Gran and for his potential testimony about any documents we discovered. That evening, I received a text from Olivia. "We need to talk. Not about the documents yet. I'm still reviewing them. Something else. Can you meet tomorrow night?" I responded that I'd be in New Hampshire during the day, but could meet her for a late dinner. She agreed, adding only, "Some things make more sense now, not in a good way." I wondered what she had discovered in her own investigation. Was she finding evidence that confirmed my claims? Or was this another attempt to defend our parents, to rationalize their actions? Either way, I needed to remain cautious. As much as I wanted to believe Olivia could be an ally, years of family dynamics had taught me that her loyalty to our parents, especially our mother, ran deep. As I packed a small bag for the New Hampshire trip, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would let unknown callers go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. "Emma Reynolds?" The woman's voice was unfamiliar. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Meredith Dawson. I was the notary on those transfer documents. Your attorney contacted me." I sat down, instantly alert. "Yes, Ms. Dawson. Thank you for calling. I just wanted you to know I've signed the affidavit she prepared about the signatures." She sounded nervous. "I never witnessed you sign anything. Your mother brought the documents with the signatures already on them. She said it was just a formality, that everyone had agreed but you were traveling." "And you notarized them anyway?" A pause. I know it was wrong, but Mrs. Reynolds was persuasive. She mentioned how helpful the Reynolds Foundation had been to my daughter's school, how they were considering increased funding for the arts program. It wasn't a direct threat, but the message was clear. This was consistent with everything I'd learned about my mother's methods: implied consequences, subtle leverage, the reminder of power differentials. "Thank you for telling me this, for coming forward." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have refused. Maybe if I had." "They would have found another way," I assured her. "They're resourceful when it comes to getting what they want." After the call ended, I sent Jessica a quick update about Meredith's confession. Another piece of evidence confirming the fraud, another witness to my parents' deception. The case was growing stronger by the hour. That night, I dreamed of the boathouse, not as I remembered it, filled with fishing gear and old canoe paddles, but as a vault of secrets, its walls lined with evidence of my existence. Photographs where I hadn't been cropped out, records of achievements my parents had minimized, letters demonstrating Gran's faith in me. I woke feeling both anxious and hopeful, eager to discover what she had hidden there for me to find. Jessica picked me up early the next morning, Bernard Weston following in his own car. The drive to New Hampshire passed quickly as we discussed strategy and possibilities. Weston shared more memories of Gran, painting a picture of a woman who was both warm and formidable, generous but clear-eyed about human nature. "Eleanor never spoke ill of your parents," he told me, "but she was concerned about their priorities. She once said, 'Robert and Diane confuse legacy with control. They want to shape the future rather than nurture it.'" The lake house appeared much as it had during my previous visit, quiet, seemingly undisturbed. We parked beside the main building and walked down the sloping path to the boathouse, a weathered structure that sat partially over the water on thick wooden pilings. The familiarity of it struck me physically. The smell of lake water and old wood, the creak of the dock beneath our feet, the way sunlight reflected off the small waves created by a distant boat. This place had been a constant in my childhood, a refuge from the manicured perfection of our Boston home. The boathouse's main door still had its combination padlock. I entered the code, Gran's birthday, and it opened with a metallic click. Inside, the space was much as I remembered. Fishing rods hanging from wall brackets, life vests stacked on shelves, an old rowboat suspended from the ceiling. The air smelled of wood and a faint hint of motor oil from the small boat engine stored. In the corner, Gran mentioned a hidden storage space, I said, looking around. Something her husband built. Weston nodded. She described it as being beneath the main floorboards, accessible from inside the boathouse. She was quite emphatic that Robert never knew about it. We began searching methodically, tapping on the wooden floor, looking for any indication of a concealed compartment. Jessica found it, a section of flooring near the back wall that sounded slightly different when struck. Upon closer inspection, we discovered a nearly invisible seam outlining a trapdoor approximately 3 feet square. "There's no handle," Jessica observed. "How would it open?" I examined the nearby wall and found a small knothole in one of the wooden panels. It seemed ordinary except for its perfect circularity. "Here," I said, inserting the brass key from Gran's box. It fit perfectly. When I turned the key, we heard a soft mechanical click. The trapdoor lifted slightly at one corner, revealing a recessed metal handle. Together, Jessica and I pulled it open, exposing a ladder descending into darkness. "There's a light switch," Weston said, pointing to a small panel beside the opening. Eleanor mentioned it was wired separately from the main boathouse circuits. I flipped the switch, and soft illumination revealed a small room below. Not just a storage space, but a fully finished chamber with shelves, a small desk, and filing cabinets. We descended carefully. The room was roughly 12 feet square, its walls lined with cedar that kept the space dry despite its proximity to the water. Built-in shelves held dozens of labeled boxes and binders. The desk contained writing supplies and a journal bound in blue leather. Along one wall stood a row of filing cabinets, each drawer neatly labeled. "Gran's archive," I whispered, running my fingers along the binder spines. They contained family photographs, originals, not the edited versions I'd seen in family albums. Here was the complete graduation photo where I'd been cropped out, showing me standing proudly beside Olivia. Here were holiday gatherings where I featured prominently, not relegated to the margins as in the official Reynolds records. Jessica had opened one of the filing cabinets. "Emma, look at this." She held a folder labeled Reynolds Foundation, Questionable. Transactions. Inside were photocopies of financial records, grant applications, and internal memos, all annotated in Gran's precise handwriting. "Your grandmother was conducting her own investigation." Weston examined another drawer, pulling out a thick envelope. "This appears to be correspondence between Eleanor and her financial advisors regarding the trust fund she established for you. Complete records, dating back 5 years before her death." I opened a box simply labeled Emma and found a collection that took my breath away. School reports, art projects, certificates of achievement, letters I'd written to Gran from summer camp and college. An entire archive of my life, preserved. Exactly as it had happened, not as my parents had reconstructed it. At the bottom of the box was a small velvet pouch containing Gran's pearl necklace. The one my mother had claimed was designated for Olivia as the senior female descendant. We spent hours in that hidden room, cataloging its contents and documenting everything with photographs. The evidence Gran had accumulated went far beyond my inheritance. She had been systematically recording concerning patterns in the foundation's operations, questionable financial decisions by my father, and what appeared to be a concerted effort to minimize my role in family affairs. Eleanor was building a case, Weston observed quietly. Not just to protect your inheritance, but to expose broader issues within the Reynolds empire. Why didn't she do anything with this information while she was alive? I asked. I believe she was waiting for the right moment, he replied. And perhaps for you to be in a position of greater independence from your parents. By the time we climbed back to the main level of the boathouse, it was early afternoon. We carefully secured the hidden room, locking it with Gran's brass key, which I now wore on a chain around my neck. We took with us the most crucial documents, those directly related to my inheritance, the foundation irregularities, and personal items that established Gran's intentions toward me. As we walked back to our cars, Jessica's expression was resolute. With this evidence, we're in an extremely strong position. The forged transfers, Meredith Dawson's testimony, Bernard's records, and now this archive, it's overwhelming proof of deliberate fraud. What's our next step? I asked. I'll prepare a comprehensive settlement demand, incorporating everything we've discovered. We'll give your parents one opportunity to resolve this privately. If they refuse, we file suit immediately. She glanced at me. Are you prepared for either outcome? I looked back at the lake house, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. The dock where Gran had taught me to cast a fishing line. Yes, I said firmly. Whatever happens, I know the truth now. That's what matters most. As I drove back to Boston, my mind was already turning to my dinner with Olivia that evening. What had she discovered in her own investigation? And more importantly, where would her loyalties fall when everything came to light? The restaurant Olivia chose for our dinner was quiet and dimly lit, known for its privacy and discretion, the kind of place where Boston's elite conducted business away from prying eyes. I arrived first, deliberately selecting a corner table that would allow us to speak without being overheard. The hostess recognized Olivia's name when I gave it for the reservation, offering a knowing smile that spoke volumes about my sister's status in certain circles. I ordered sparkling water and waited, my mind still processing everything we'd discovered at the lake house. Gran's hidden archive hadn't just confirmed what I already suspected. It had revealed a pattern of deception far more extensive than I'd imagined. The Reynolds Foundation, that bastion of family pride and public admiration, appeared to be operating in ethically murky waters under my father's direction. What had begun as my personal quest for inheritance justice was evolving into something much larger. Olivia arrived precisely on time, as always. She wore a charcoal gray dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But something about her appearance was different. The polished perfection she usually projected seemed slightly frayed at the edges, her hair less perfectly styled, a certain tightness around her eyes suggesting stress or sleeplessness. She said, sliding into her seat. No air kiss, no obligatory compliment about my appearance. Something had definitely shifted. Thank you for meeting, I said, studying her face. You mentioned there was something besides the documents you wanted to discuss? She ordered a gin martini before answering, her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the tablecloth. I've been doing some investigating of my own, she finally said. About the investment capital for my firm. The waiter brought her drink and she took a sip before continuing. You were right. The money didn't come from the family business account. At least, not directly. Where did it come from? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. A series of transfers. She withdrew a folded paper from her purse and smoothed it on the table between us. First from your trust fund to Reynolds Family Holdings, then to a temporary holding company called North Star Ventures, and finally to Reynolds Investment Partners as seed funding. $300,000. Exactly. I stared at the paper, which outlined the transactions in neat columns of dates and amounts. You didn't know? Olivia shook her head slightly. Dad told me the capital came from liquidating some underperforming real estate holdings. I never questioned it. Why would I? He's handled all the major financial decisions in the family since we were kids. And now? Now I'm questioning everything. She met my gaze directly. I've been combing through the company books for the past 2 days. There are irregularities, transactions that don't make sense, funds moving between accounts in ways that seem designed to obscure their origin. I wasn't entirely surprised, given what we'd found in Grant's archive, but hearing it from Olivia, the golden child, the trusted heir, lent it new weight. What kind of irregularities? She glanced around before lowering her voice. Foundation money being used for personal investments. Tax deductions claimed for charitable donations that were actually business expenses. And there's more concerning the lake house. Our appetizers arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Neither of us had much appetite, but we made a pretense of eating as Olivia continued. The lakefront property was leveraged multiple times, not just for my startup capital. Dad took out 3 separate equity loans against it in the past 2 years, totaling nearly $1 million. $1 million? I set down my fork. What could possibly? That's what I've been trying to figure out. The money doesn't appear in any of the regular family accounts or businesses, it's just gone. The implications were disturbing. My father had not only stolen my inheritance, but had been treating it as a personal ATM, extracting value from property that wasn't rightfully his. Have you asked him about it directly? Olivia's laugh was brittle. How exactly? Hey, Dad, I noticed you've been committing fraud using property you stole from my sister. Fair point. She took another sip of her martini. Besides, he's been unreachable since yesterday. Mom says he's at a foundation retreat in Vermont, but his assistant let slip that she doesn't actually know where he is. His calendar was cleared without explanation. A chill ran through me. You think he knows we're investigating? I think he suspected something since you visited the lake house. The meeting with Walter Green was clearly damage control, but after I started asking questions about my company's funding, she trailed off, then added quietly, I think he's scrambling. The waiter cleared our barely touched appetizers and brought our main courses. We maintained superficial conversation until he was out of earshot. What are you going to do, Liv? I asked when we were alone again. About your company, I mean. The startup capital was essentially stolen from me. She met my eyes steadily. I'm going to make it right. I've already spoken with my bank about a loan to replace the original funding. Once that's approved, I'll transfer the full amount to whatever account you designate. She hesitated. That doesn't undo what happened, but I want you to know I wasn't complicit. I never would have accepted that money if I'd known its source. I believed her, somewhat to my own surprise. Olivia had been many things over the years. Competitive, occasionally dismissive, too eager for our parents' approval, but never dishonest. At least not with me. What about Mom? I asked. Have you spoken with her about any of this? Olivia's expression hardened slightly. I tried. She deflected, said I was misinterpreting normal financial transactions, then changed the subject to the Foundation's upcoming gala, classic Diane Reynolds avoidance tactics. I couldn't help but smile at that accurate assessment. Our mother had elevated avoidance to an art form, particularly when confronted with unpleasant realities that threatened her curated image of family perfection. My attorney is preparing a settlement demand, I told her, based on everything. We've discovered it's not just about the lake house and trust fund anymore. There are serious questions about foundation management and potential financial misconduct. Olivia winced. That's going to get ugly. It doesn't have to. If they agree to return what's rightfully mine and address the other issues properly, this can stay private. And if they don't? Then we go to court. I kept my voice steady. I have the evidence, Liv. Forged documents, witness statements, Gran's hidden records, even video testimony she recorded before her death. I'll win if it comes to that. She was quiet for a long moment, pushing food around her plate. You know what this would do to the foundation's reputation, to the family name. I do. That's why I'm giving them one chance to resolve it privately. Olivia set down her fork with deliberate care. I want to see it. All of it. The evidence you've collected. Grand's records, everything. Not because I don't believe you, but because I need to understand the full extent of what we're dealing with. I nodded. Tomorrow. Jessica's office, 10 o'clock. She'll walk us through everything. I'll be there. She hesitated, then added, Whatever happens next, I need you to know I'm not taking their side in this, not anymore. The words hung between us, weightier than they might seem to an outsider. Olivia had always been the loyal daughter, the one who reflected our parents' values and ambitions without question. This declaration of independence, however limited, represented a seismic shift in our family's power dynamics. As we left the restaurant, she surprised me with a brief, fierce hug. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I drove home through Boston's evening traffic, my thoughts churning. Olivia's unexpected alliance changed the landscape considerably. As the favored child and presumptive heir to the Reynolds business empire, her support lent credibility to my claims that my parents couldn't easily dismiss. When I reached my apartment, I found a large manila envelope that had been slipped under my door. No postmark, no return address, just my name handwritten in block letters. Inside was a USB drive and a note on plain white paper. You should see this before it's gone. Not everyone at the foundation supports what's happening. I stared. At the cryptic message, a mix of curiosity and caution washing over me. An ally within the foundation, or some kind of trap designed to undermine my case? I called Jessica immediately. Someone delivered a USB drive to my apartment, anonymous, with a note suggesting it contains important foundation information. Don't open it on your personal computer, she advised. Bring it to my office first thing tomorrow. We'll examine it on an isolated system that can't be traced back to you. Her caution made sense. If my parents were indeed scrambling, as Olivia suggested, they might resort to increasingly desperate tactics to protect themselves. I barely slept that night, my mind cycling through possible scenarios for the coming confrontation. By morning, I had settled on a simple strategy: complete transparency. No more family secrets, no more polite fictions, no more allowing my parents to control the narrative. Jessica's office was in a restored brownstone in Back Bay, its understated elegance projecting competence without ostentation. I arrived early, the mysterious USB drive secured in an inner pocket of my purse. One of Jessica's tech specialists was already waiting, a portable computer setup designed for secure file review at the ready. We'll scan it for malware first, he explained, then review the contents on this isolated system. If it contains anything problematic, it won't affect our network or leave any digital footprints leading back to you. While he worked, Jessica briefed me on the settlement demand she had prepared. It's comprehensive but not punitive, she explained. Full return of the lake house property with all encumbrances removed, restitution of the $300,000 trust fund with reasonable interest, compensation for legal fees, and an independent audit of foundation finances to be reviewed by a neutral third party. What about criminal charges? I asked. The forgery? The fraud? We're not pursuing criminal prosecution as part of the settlement. That's our leverage. Resolve this privately or face potential criminal consequences when we file suit. She studied my face. Is that acceptable to you? I can add criminal referral to our demands if you prefer. I considered what that would mean. My parents potentially facing arrest, trial, public shame. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to actively seek that outcome. No, the approach you've outlined is right. I want justice, not vengeance. Jessica nodded, seeming to approve of my decision. The tech team is ready. Let's see what's on that drive. The USB contained a folder of PDFs, internal Reynolds Foundation documents spanning the past 5 years, financial reports, board meeting, minutes, grant disbursement records, and most damning of all, emails between my father and Walter Green discussing how to recategorize certain expenditures to maximize tax benefits. These are foundation funds being diverted to personal use, Jessica observed, scrolling through a spreadsheet. Travel expenses for family vacations classified as site visits. Home renovations listed as office improvements. Payments to consultants, who appear to have done no actual work for the foundation. The tech specialist highlighted another document. This one's interesting. It shows transfers from the foundation to something called Legacy Heritage Partners that then made payments to your sister's investment firm. More than just the trust fund money was funneled to Olivia's company, I realized. They were using the foundation as a slush fund. Jessica was making notes rapidly. This significantly strengthens our position, especially regarding the need for a foundation audit. Whoever sent this took a considerable risk. A knock at the door announced Olivia's arrival. She entered looking polished as usual in a tailored pantsuit, but the shadows under her eyes betrayed her lack of sleep. She glanced at the computer screen showing foundation documents. "I see you've received a delivery," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You knew about this?" I asked. "Not specifically. But I've suspected for a while that certain foundation staff were growing uncomfortable with Dad's management. Especially after the Connor Grant situation last year." "Connor Grant?" Jessica looked up from her notes. "A major scholarship program supposedly established to help low-income students from Boston public schools. $2 million in foundation. Funds were allocated, press releases went out. The mayor attended the announcement ceremony, but the actual disbursements have been minimal, less than 10% of the promised amount." "Where did the rest of the money go?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. Olivia's mouth tightened. "That's one of the questions I couldn't get answered when I started digging into the books. There are references to administrative costs and program development, but nothing specific." The tech specialist had opened another file from the USB. "I think I found it," he said, turning the screen toward us. A series of transfers from the Connor Fund to various shell companies, which eventually consolidated in an offshore account in the Caymans. Jessica examined the document carefully. "This goes beyond civil fraud. If these records are accurate, we're looking at potential tax evasion, misuse of charitable funds, possibly even money laundering. Could it be a mistake?" I asked, struggling to absorb the implications. "Creative accounting rather than actual criminal activity?" "The systematic nature of these transactions suggests otherwise," Jessica replied. "This appears deliberate and carefully structured to avoid detection." Olivia had gone very still. "I knew there were financial irregularities, but this—" She shook her head slightly. "This is why Dad disappeared when I started asking questions. He knew what I might find." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing the documents from the USB drive alongside the evidence I'd already gathered. The picture that emerged was disturbing. A years-long pattern of financial manipulation using both family assets and foundation funds, with my inheritance being just one piece of a much larger puzzle. "I need to show you something else," Olivia said when we had finished with the USB files. She opened her briefcase and withdrew a folder. "After our dinner last night, I went to the office and pulled these records. They show every property transaction the Reynolds companies have made in the past 5 years. She laid out a series of documents on Jessica's conference table. "See this pattern? Properties purchased through shell companies, held briefly, then sold to the foundation at inflated values. The foundation then either holds them as assets or donates them to partner organizations while claiming tax deductions for the full inflated amount. Property flipping using foundation money," Jessica observed. "Artificially increasing values for tax purposes." "Exactly. And guess who conducted all the appraisals?" Olivia pointed to a recurring name on the documentation. Thomas Wilcox, Dad's golf buddy and former college roommate. The scope of the deception was staggering. What had begun as my personal quest for inheritance justice had expanded into something much larger and more disturbing. My parents hadn't just stolen from me. They had been systematically exploiting the foundation's charitable status for personal gain. "We need to adjust our strategy," Jessica said, gathering the documents into organized piles. "This is far more extensive than we initially understood." "What are our options?" I asked. "We could still proceed with our original settlement demand, focusing narrowly on your inheritance. That's the cleanest approach and most likely to be accepted." She tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. "Or we could incorporate these new findings, making the foundation audit a central rather than secondary demand. Which would you recommend?" "From a strictly legal perspective, the narrow approach is more likely to succeed quickly. Focus on what they've done to you personally, get your property and money back, then decide whether to pursue the broader issues separately." She looked at me directly. "But given what we're seeing here, I'm concerned that a narrow settlement might inadvertently help them cover up the larger misconduct." It was a moral dilemma as much as a legal one. Did I focus on righting the personal wrong done to me? Or did I take on the responsibility of exposing potentially criminal misuse of charitable funds? "What about a middle path?" Olivia suggested. "Demand Emma's inheritance be returned immediately, but also require a full independent audit of the foundation as part of the settlement. Not punitive damages, just transparency." Jessica considered this. "That could work. It addresses the personal harm while not allowing the broader issues to be swept under the rug." She turned to me. "It's your decision, Emma. How do you want to proceed?" I thought about Gran's hidden archive, about her methodical documentation of concerning patterns, about her video testimony explaining why she'd left her property specifically to me. She had valued honesty above all else, had spent years quietly gathering evidence of troubling behavior without confrontation or drama. We go with Olivia's suggestion, I decided. My inheritance restored immediately, plus a full independent audit of the foundation with results reported to the board of directors. And one more condition. My parents stepped down from operational control of the foundation during the audit process. Olivia inhaled sharply. That's going to be the sticking point. The foundation is Mom's entire identity and Dad's power base. They won't give it up without a fight. Then they'll have to decide what matters more, maintaining control or avoiding public scandal and potential criminal charges. Jessica nodded approvingly. "I'll revise the settlement demand accordingly. We should be ready to deliver it by tomorrow morning." The question of delivery method remained. A formal letter would be easy to ignore. An email could be missed or filtered. We needed an approach that would ensure my parents understood the seriousness of the situation and the strength of our evidence. "The foundation board meeting," Olivia said suddenly. "It's tomorrow afternoon at the downtown office. All the directors will be there, including Dad if he's back from his mysterious absence." "Is that the best venue?" Jessica asked. "Settlement discussions are typically private." "We're not looking for a public confrontation," I clarified. "Just delivery in a context where they can't simply dismiss it. Olivia and I could request a private word before the meeting begins." The plan took shape quickly. Olivia would attend the board meeting as usual, and I would accompany her as her guest. We would arrive early to speak with our parents privately, present the settlement demand with a brief overview of our evidence, and give them 48 hours to respond before filing suit. When our strategy session concluded, Jessica pulled me aside while Olivia gathered her things. "Are you prepared for how they might react?" she asked quietly. "Confrontations like this can get ugly, especially with family." "I've spent years managing their disappointment and manipulation," I replied. "I can handle one more difficult conversation. Just remember, no matter what they say, No matter what emotional buttons they push, you have the legal and moral high ground here. Don't let them make you doubt that. That evening, I received a text from my mother. I understand you're planning to attend tomorrow's board meeting with Olivia. How lovely to have you take an interest in the foundation after all this time. Perhaps we could have lunch beforehand to discuss some ideas I have for more family involvement. The message was so perfectly on brand for Diane Reynolds that I almost laughed. Even now, with everything unraveling around her, she was attempting to maintain the fiction of family harmony and control the narrative. I didn't respond. An hour later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Emma. My father's voice, terse and businesslike. We need to talk. Yes, we do. Tomorrow, before the board meeting. That's not a good time. I'm proposing we meet tonight. Just the two of us. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Separate me from my supporters. Deal with me one-on-one where his authority had always held sway. That doesn't work for me, I replied evenly. Tomorrow with Olivia present or not at all. A pause, then. Olivia's involved in this discussion? She is. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear him recalculating his approach. Very well. Tomorrow, 30 minutes before the meeting is scheduled to begin. My office at the foundation. We'll be there. After he hung up, I immediately called Olivia. Dad just reached out wanting to meet tonight. When I insisted you be included, he agreed to tomorrow before the board meeting. He's back in town then, she mused, and looking to contain the situation quickly. Did he say anything about what he knows? No, but the fact that he called at all suggests he's aware something's happening. He's not one for casual check-ins. No, he's not. She sounded troubled. Be careful tonight. Make sure your apartment is secure, and maybe don't access any sensitive documents from your home computer. You think he'd go that far? I think we don't know how far he'll go. The dad we thought we knew wouldn't commit. Fraud or forged signatures either. Her voice had an edge I'd rarely heard before. We're threatening everything he's built. People do desperate things when their empires are crumbling. After we hung up, I found myself checking my door locks and window latches, feeling slightly paranoid but unwilling to dismiss Olivia's concerns. I spent the evening reviewing the key points Jessica had prepared for our meeting, committing crucial details to memory in case I needed to speak without notes. Morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed with careful deliberation, a charcoal gray suit similar to what I'd wear to court, professional without being ostentatious. No Reynolds family jewelry, no concessions to my mother's expectations of feminine presentation. Just clean lines and quiet authority. Jessica had arranged for a courier to deliver the formal settlement documents to her office, where Olivia and I would collect them before heading to the foundation. Remember, she advised during our final phone consultation, you're not there to negotiate or debate, you're delivering terms. Any discussion of details should happen through counsel. The Reynolds Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek downtown building, its reception area designed to impress with its marble floors and tasteful display of artwork from grant recipients. As Olivia and I stepped off the elevator, the receptionist's eyes widened slightly. Clearly, she hadn't expected to see me. Ms. Reynolds, she said, automatically addressing Olivia rather than me. The board members are gathering in the conference room. Mr. Reynolds asked to be notified when you arrived. We have a private meeting with my parents first, Olivia replied smoothly. In my father's office. Has he arrived yet? Yes, about 20 minutes ago. Mrs. Reynolds is with him. We walked down the corridor toward the executive offices, our heels clicking against the polished floors in unintentional synchrony. Portraits of past foundation leaders lined the walls, primarily Reynolds men, with the occasional wife positioned supportively beside her husband. At the end of the hall hung the largest portrait. Our parents, posed before the Boston skyline, expressions of benevolent authority carefully composed. Robert Reynolds' office door was closed. Olivia knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response, a small assertion of the changing power dynamic between us and our parents. They were waiting, seated side by side behind my father's massive desk rather than in the conversational grouping of chairs by the window. A united front, physically elevated by the slight platform on which the desk sat. I recognized the staging for what it was, a deliberate attempt to maintain authority and distance. Olivia, Emma. My father nodded to each of us in turn, his expression carefully neutral. You wanted to speak with us before the meeting. My mother's smile was brittle. It's so nice to see you taking an interest in the foundation, Emma. Though, the board meeting is generally limited to directors and officially invited guests. I'm not here for the board meeting, I replied calmly. We're here to deliver this. I placed the envelope containing our settlement demand on the desk between them. Neither reached for it immediately. What exactly is this? My father asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew. A settlement demand, Olivia answered before I could. Outlining the terms under which Emma will refrain from filing a civil lawsuit regarding her stolen inheritance and the foundation's financial irregularities. My mother's careful composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening before she regained control. That's a very serious accusation, Olivia. I'm surprised you would involve yourself in such dramatics. It's not an accusation, Mother. It's a documented fact. Olivia's voice was cool and professional, as if she were addressing difficult clients rather than our parents. Emma has compiled extensive evidence of fraud, including the forged transfer documents with her signature, witness testimony from the notary who confirmed she never observed Emma signing anything, and Bernard Weston's records confirming Grand's actual estate plan. My father had gone very still, only his eyes moving as he assessed this new reality. I see Olivia has been drawn into your conspiracy theories, Emma. That's unfortunate. No conspiracy theory, I replied evenly. Just hard evidence. Gran left. A video statement explaining her decision to leave the lake house and trust fund to me directly. She also left extensive records that we've recovered from her hidden archive at the lake house property. Hidden archive? My mother's laugh was brittle. Eleanor had a flair for the dramatic but secret compartments. Really, Emma. In the boathouse, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. Behind a locked door that requires a key she left with Bernard Weston specifically for me. Inside, we found complete records of her estate planning, copies of the original documents, and her personal journals detailing her concerns about how the foundation was being managed. For the first time, I saw genuine alarm in my father's eyes. He reached for the envelope, opening it with hands that weren't quite steady. As he scanned the first page of the settlement demand, his face hardened. This is absurd. You expect us to step down from operational control of our own foundation based on what? Some misunderstanding about Eleanor's intentions and a few financial transactions you've misinterpreted. Not a misunderstanding, Olivia interjected. The evidence is clear. Emma's signature was forged on the transfer documents. The lake house and trust fund were never meant to be consolidated into the family holdings. And the foundation's financial records show a pattern of misappropriation that goes well beyond creative accounting. My mother turned to her. Betrayal, evident in her expression. Olivia, I can't believe you would participate in this attack on your own family, after everything we've done for you. This isn't about attacking family, I said firmly. It's about correcting a wrong and ensuring transparency going forward. The settlement terms are reasonable. Return of my rightful inheritance, an independent audit of foundation finances, and temporary leadership change during that process. No public exposure, no criminal charges. Criminal charges? My father's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. You're threatening us with criminal prosecution? Not threatening, I clarified. Offering an alternative. If we can't reach a private settlement, the evidence will be presented in court as part of a civil suit. At that point, it becomes public record. And what happens next would be beyond our control. He stood abruptly, looming over the desk. This is nothing but extortion wrapped in legal language. You've never appreciated what this family has built, the legacy we've created. Always questioning, always undermining, never fitting into the role you were born to fill. I remained seated, refusing to be physically intimidated. My role wasn't predetermined, Dad. That's something you and Mom never understood. I'm not rejecting the Reynolds legacy. I'm refusing to accept the version of it that requires erasing parts of myself. Melodramatic as always, my mother sighed. No one has erased you, Emma. You chose your path, one that didn't align with family priorities. Actions have consequences. Yes, they do, I agreed, including forging legal documents and misappropriating foundation funds. My father had begun pacing behind the desk, his controlled facade cracking. You have no idea what it takes to build something like this, to maintain it, to protect it. The sacrifices, the compromises. You sit in judgment with your simplistic notions of right and wrong, but the real world requires flexibility, strategic thinking. Is that what we're calling fraud now? Strategic thinking? Olivia's tone was scathing. I've seen the books, Dad. I know about the Connor Scholarship funds diverted to offshore accounts. I know about the property flipping schemes with Wilcox's inflated appraisals. This isn't flexibility, it's criminal misconduct. The color drained from his face. You've been spying on confidential foundation business? I've been doing my due diligence as a board member, she corrected. Something I should have done years ago instead of accepting everything at face value. My mother had taken the settlement document from my father and was reading it carefully, her expression unreadable. 48 hours is not sufficient time to consider such extensive demands, she said finally, her voice regaining its usual composed quality. We would need at least a week for our attorneys to review this properly. 72 hours, I countered. No more. And during that time, all foundation financial activities are frozen. No transfers, no new commitments, no document shredding. She looked at me with something like grudging respect. You've become quite assertive, Emma. I suppose we should take some credit for that, at least. Eleanor's influence, I think, my father muttered. She always encouraged your worst tendencies, toward defiance. She encouraged me to think for myself, I corrected. To question authority, including hers. To value truth above appearances. A sharp knock at the door interrupted our confrontation. Walter Green entered without waiting for a response, his expression grave. He stopped short when he saw Olivia and me. Robert, the board is assembled and waiting, he said, his eyes darting between all of us. Should I inform them there will be a delay? My father straightened his tie, visibly pulling himself together. No delay. We'll proceed as scheduled. He fixed us with a hard stare. This discussion is not concluded, but it will have to continue later, through proper channels. 72 hours, I reminded him. Then we file. As we stood to leave, my mother touched my arm lightly. Emma, regardless of these disagreements, you're still family. We can resolve this privately, without destroying everything we've built. Her words were conciliatory, but her eyes remained calculating. She was already strategizing, looking for leverage, for a way to minimize damage and maintain control. That's entirely up to you, I replied, gently removing my arm from her touch. The terms are clear. You have 3 days to decide what matters more, the truth or the appearance of perfection you've worked so hard to maintain. Olivia and I left the office together, both of us silent until we reached the elevator. As the doors closed behind us, she let out a long breath. Well, that went about as well as could be expected, she said, a hint of dark humor in her voice. Dad's furious, Mom's plotting, and Walter looked like he might have a heart attack on the spot. Do you think they'll agree to the terms? I asked. She considered this as the elevator descended. Not willingly, but they're pragmatic enough to recognize when they're cornered. The question is whether they'll try some last-minute maneuver to undermine our position. Like what? I don't know, but I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. The elevator reached the lobby, and she touched my shoulder briefly. I should go back up for the board meeting. Keep up appearances while they decide what to do. Be careful, I warned. Dad looked ready to explode. Don't worry. In a room full of board members, they'll both be on their best behavior. The perfect philanthropic power couple. Her smile was ironic. It's what they do best, after all. Maintain the facade, no matter what's crumbling behind it. As I left, the foundation building, stepping into the bright spring sunshine, I felt oddly light despite the tension of the confrontation. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I had spoken my truth to my parents without flinching, without minimizing, without accepting their version of reality over my own. Whatever happened next, whether they accepted our terms or fought to, the bitter end, that victory couldn't be taken from me. The 72 hours after our confrontation passed in a strange limbo. I returned to work, attended meetings, responded to emails, all while carrying the weight of uncertain resolution. Jessica advised me to maintain normal routines while we waited for my parents' response. Don't give them any reason to claim you're acting erratically, she counseled. Just business as usual. Olivia kept me updated with brief, cryptic texts. Board meeting continued normally after you left. Dad canceled tomorrow's investor lunch. Mom making calls to Foundation allies. Each message hinted at behind-the-scenes maneuvering, preparation for either compliance or battle. On the morning of the third day, exactly 68 hours after we'd delivered our settlement demand, Walter Green called Jessica's office requesting a meeting. All parties present, neutral location, he specified. Jessica suggested her conference room. Walter countered with a private dining room at the Harvard Club. We agreed to meet at noon. The Harvard Club represented everything the Reynolds name stood for: tradition, exclusivity, carefully preserved power. My parents had held their wedding reception there 40 years earlier. Every milestone family celebration had taken place within its wood-paneled walls. Now it would witness either reconciliation or final rupture. The private dining room was intimate, one table with seating for 8, though only 6 places were set. My parents arrived precisely on time, flanked by Walter Green and another attorney I didn't recognize. My father looked composed but tired, with new lines etched around his mouth. My mother was impeccably dressed as always, though I noticed her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her napkin. Jessica and I had arrived 15 minutes early to prepare. Olivia joined us just before noon, having come directly from her office. She squeezed my hand beneath the table as we waited for the preliminary courtesies to conclude. Once we were seated, Walter cleared his throat and placed a folder on the table. We've reviewed the settlement demand and are prepared to respond, he began formally. My clients have authorized me to present a counterproposal. Jessica accepted the folder with professional courtesy. Before we review this, I should clarify that any substantial deviation from the core demands will result in immediate filing of our suit. We're not here to negotiate the fundamental terms. Walter nodded stiffly. Understood. However, we believe our response addresses the central concerns while proposing a more practical implementation timeline. As Jessica reviewed the documents, my father spoke directly to me for the first time. Emma, regardless of how this resolves, I want you to know that we never intended to cause you harm. The decisions made regarding Eleanor's estate were based on what we believed was best for the family legacy as a whole. I met his gaze steadily. Forging my signature wasn't a decision about legacy, Dad. It was theft. My mother flinched visibly at the word. Such harsh terminology isn't helpful, Emma. We're trying to find a path forward that preserves family relationships. Honesty is the only path to genuine relationship, I replied. Something Gran understood better than anyone. Jessica looked up from the counter-proposal. This appears largely acceptable, with some concerning modifications. She turned to Walter. Your clients agree to return the lake house property to Emma immediately, along with the trust fund amount plus standard interest. They also agreed to an independent audit of foundation finances. That's correct, Walter confirmed. However, Jessica continued, they've altered the leadership transition requirements. Instead of stepping down during the audit process, they proposed to remain in their positions with oversight from an expanded executive committee. My father leaned forward. Complete removal from operational control would trigger exactly the kind of public speculation we're all trying to avoid. The proposed executive committee would include 3 independent directors with full access to all information. Olivia, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Who would select these independent directors? The current board, naturally, my mother replied. The board you've handpicked and cultivated for years, Olivia countered. That's not independence, that's controlled supervision. The tension in the room thickened. My father turned to Olivia with a pained expression. Your involvement in this situation continues to surprise me, Olivia. You, of all people, should understand what's at stake for the family name. I understand perfectly, she replied evenly. That's why I'm insisting on real accountability, not performance of it. Jessica had continued reviewing the document. There's another significant modification here. The settlement includes a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement binding all parties from ever discussing the circumstances of this dispute or the foundation audit findings. Standard practice in family settlements, the second attorney noted, protecting privacy for all involved. Or silencing potential whistleblowers, Jessica countered. This clause would prevent reporting of any criminal activity discovered during the audit, regardless of severity. My mother's perfect posture stiffened further. No one is suggesting there's criminal activity to report. The Foundation's work has always been conducted with the highest ethical standards. Then there should be no concern about removing the gag clause, I said. Silence fell as both sides considered the impasse. Finally, my father sighed heavily. What do you really want, Emma? Beyond the property and money? What is your endgame here? The question caught me off guard with its directness. What did I want? Not revenge, certainly. Not public humiliation of my parents. Not the destruction of the Foundation's legitimate charitable work. Integrity, I answered finally. In the Foundation's operations, in our family interactions, in how we address wrongs when they occur. I want acknowledgement of what happened without erasure or rewriting of history. My father studied me for a long moment. And if we provide that? Full return of your inheritance, temporary leadership transition to a truly independent interim team during the audit, no restrictive non-disclosure requirements. Then we have a settlement, I confirmed. No lawsuit, no public exposure of past actions. He exchanged glances with my mother, some unspoken communication passing between them. She gave a barely perceptible nod. Prepare the revised agreement, he instructed Walter. We'll sign today. The remainder of the meeting focused on logistics, property transfer documentation, fund transfers, audit team selection, interim leadership structure. Throughout the discussion, I observed my parents closely. My father seemed resigned but practical, already planning how to manage this transition with minimal disruption. My mother remained tense, her composed exterior barely containing what I suspected was rage at this forced concession. When all details were finalized and the revised agreement prepared for signatures, Walter requested a brief private conversation with my parents. They stepped outside, returning 10 minutes later with expressions of grim resolve. The signing itself was anticlimactic. Names on paper, initials on each page, the quiet rustle of documents being organized into folders. No dramatic confrontation, no emotional breakthrough, just the formal conclusion of a business transaction. As we prepared to leave, My mother approached me. "The lake house keys," she said, placing them on the table beside me. "The caretaker comes on Tuesdays. The security code is still your birth date." There was something almost wistful in her voice, not quite regret, but perhaps recognition of an ending. I accepted the keys with a simple, "Thank you." My father shook Jessica's hand with formal correctness, then turned to me. "You won the battle, Emma. I hope it brings you what you're looking for." Before I could respond, he added in a lower voice, "Eleanor would be proud of your persistence. She never backed down either." It was perhaps the closest thing to approval he had ever offered for qualities I shared with Gran, qualities he had spent years trying to suppress in me. 6 months later, I stood on the dock of the lake house, morning mist still rising from the water's surface. The property transfer had been completed without further conflict. The trust fund money had been restored with interest, and the foundation audit had proceeded under the oversight of a respected nonprofit consulting firm, resulting in significant structural changes and financial reforms. My parents had ultimately decided to retire from active foundation management, citing a desire to make room for the next generation of leadership. The press release announcing their departure had been carefully worded to emphasize their visionary establishment of stronger governance structures, transforming potential disgrace into a legacy of institutional improvement. Olivia had declined a position on the restructured foundation board, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding her investment firm with legitimately obtained financing. She had repaid me the $300,000 that had been diverted to her startup, insisting on including interest despite my protests. Our relationship had evolved into something new, not the competitive dynamic our parents had fostered, nor blind family loyalty, but a cautious alliance built on mutual respect and shared experience. We spoke weekly now, more honestly than we ever had before. As for my parents, our interactions remained formal but civil. Holiday gatherings were now held at neutral locations rather than the family home. Conversations carefully avoided both recriminations about the past and excessive pretense about the present. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was reality. And after years of carefully maintained fiction, reality felt like progress. The lake house had become my sanctuary. I'd preserved Gran's touches while making it my own again, repainting the blue shutters she'd loved, restoring the garden she'd tended, setting up a small nonprofit of my own that provided nature retreats for children from underserved Boston neighborhoods. The hidden room in the boathouse remained my private archive, a reminder of truth's power and the importance of maintaining one's own narrative. I sometimes imagined Gran there, methodically preserving evidence against the day it would be needed, trusting that I would eventually find my way to it. "Some inheritances aren't property or money," she had said in her video testimony. "The most valuable thing I can leave Emma is the courage to stand in her truth, even when standing alone." In the end, I hadn't stood alone. Olivia had found her own courage. Jessica had provided strategic guidance. Even Bernard Weston had stepped forward when it mattered most. But the first step, the decision to question the narrative I'd been handed, to investigate what had been hidden, to confront what had been denied, that had been mine alone. The most valuable inheritance wasn't the lake house or the trust fund. It was the willingness to seek truth, whatever it might cost. As the morning sun burned away the last wisps of mist from the lake, I turned toward the house. There was work to do, a future to build that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. The Reynolds legacy would continue, but on new terms, with integrity rather than appearance as its foundation. That was an inheritance worth protecting. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.